Investment Conference that we started here yesterday. The aim of this conference is just to showcase the available investment opportunities that we have here in Nakuru. And the model we have taken as a county, because the role of county is just to create an enabling environment. It is the private sector that will drive economic growth. So we as a county are working closely with the private sector. We're working closely with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We're working closely with the Nakuru Business Association. We're working closely with the Chamber of Commerce. And we're working closely with the private sector so that we are able to work together and create economic growth within the county. I'm also happy that we also have our local companies here, and as we have gone around the exhibition stands, we've been able to see the various companies that we have here, Canas, have Reliable Concrete, amongst others, and we are happy to have them here with us. I'm also happy to have international delegates who have come from as far as Mexico, the US, Canada, Dubai, Iran. We want to welcome you, as well as the ambassadors who were present yesterday from Estonia, Hungary. We also like to welcome them. For today, as the MC has mentioned, we are after our first presentation by Oserian on the Oserian Industrial Park. We'll go to a very important component for us, and that is the business-to-business sessions. They shall be concurrent, and here we are going to break into sectors in line with the national government's Big Four agenda, and we want to give an opportunity for the business people to be able to ask some of the pertinent questions. For example, yesterday, one issue that came out very strongly was the issue of zoning of industrial areas. So we would like, when we go into the session of lands, physical housing, and infrastructure, let us now get some of the possible solutions to some of those challenges. And then also important for us is that this conference, we want it to be as practical as possible. And that is why tomorrow we are going to have site visits so that potential investors can go and see firsthand for themselves where the Oserian Industrial Park is, where the Kengen Industrial Park is, and where the Menengai Industrial Park is. Ladies and gentlemen, with those few remarks, allow me to welcome the PS for Housing, Mr. Charles Hinga. Karibu.
Cabinet Secretary for Devolution, Honorable Eugene Malwa, CAS and fellow Nakurian, if I may use that word, my fellow peers, Kipto, Honorable Governor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very much honored to be here this afternoon. For most of you who may not know, I am from Nakuru County. I was born in Bondeni Hospital, in Naivasha boarding. So, mimi ni mwenyeji kabisa. I've been engaging with His Excellency the Governor to find an opportune time for us to come and see how we can collaborate together, especially on these issues of affordable housing. And the last couple of months, we've been working very hard to put together a plan, because most of you, and you've all been very much aware of the discourse and the kind of conversations that are currently ongoing in the country around our fiscal status. The purse is getting tighter and tighter. The economy is become a bit sluggish. And households are hurting, people are hurting. So it is important for government to look at how we can be able to mobilize private sector capital so that it can be able to plug in the gap And that is my main primary responsibility. I spent the last 19 years in South Africa, Johannesburg. I'm an investment banker by profession. And my mandate was mainly on PPPs and project finance, which is all off-balance sheet type of financing. So allow me then to share with you briefly, flight catch. Okay. With our friends at World Bank and the Nakuru County, we've got a project, and most of you have seen it's being exhibited here in Naivasha, where it's going to be one of our flagship projects in the country, about 2,300 units. And it is by no chance that we chose Naivasha. We recognize the importance of Naivasha in the current landscape of this country. We're investing billions of dollars into this place. The SGR will soon be terminating here. There is a special economic zone here. There's already a lot of activities here in Naivasha. But what we don't want to do is to have unplanned settlements. So we have industrial parks here, and people are having to come from Nairobi or from Nakuru to come and work here. And those there that are working here, we'd want to make sure that they also have an opportunity of living in a decent house. So last year, December 12, and excuse my voice, I'm struggling a little bit. His Excellency the President, December 12, Jamhuri Day, you said that under the affordable housing program, for the same amount of money that you pay for rent, you'll be able to pay the same amount, but get a decent house, underline decent, that you can own, but is affordable. Now, that is a daunting task, given that the current status of our housing market in this country is actually very gloomy. Our housing demand a year is 250,000 houses. Of the 250,000 houses, 170,000 houses is what we should be producing for the majority of our people who are in the low to mid income. And then the balance, which is 80,000, is what is for middle and high income. In terms of the supply, of the 80,000, we are currently doing 49,000. This is according to the World Bank recent study. But the atrocious number is on the affordable housing as a country collectively. We are doing only 1,000 out of 170,000 units. And no wonder why we are notorious for some of the largest informal settlements in this country, because we are unable to provide and to supply the right kind of houses for the majority of our people. And that is what is at the heart of this affordable housing program. Now, we have identified 4 key areas that are a threat to making housing affordable. First is the issue of land. Land in this country is obscenely high. As a matter of fact, there is a study that showed that Nairobi has one of the most expensive land in the continent. Thank you very much. Number 2 is our cost of doing business and cost of construction. We have a very old building code, 1947, that still recognizes stone as the only permanent building material. As a country, we have not leveraged other technologies, industrial building techniques, appropriate building techniques. And those are things that will not only lower the cost, but will also help us to deliver in good time. Number 3 is the cost of processes. You know, our processes take too long. Take procurement, for example. Procurement takes so long. And yet, when you go to the Constitution, I think Article 223 of the Constitution has defined procurement in very simple terms. It has to be transparent, it has to be competitive, right? And there has to be value for money. But then we have made procurement to be so complex. And as a result, we find that a lot of youngsters now, instead of aspiring to become engineers and architects, today they want to become procurement officers, because it is in that dysfunctional aspect where there's a lot of corruption that comes in. Then there is issues of titling, and you know how the issues of titling in this country. So that alone adds another 15 to 20% to the cost of housing processes. And lastly is the cost of financing. Cost of financing is obscenely high in this country, but you have got to look at it both at the supply and the demand side. On the demand side, Kenya has one of the lowest mortgage rates in the number of mortgages in this country. For a country of almost 45 million people, to have only less than 25,000 mortgages, it is a joke. As a matter of fact, the 25,000 mortgages, out of the 25, 17,000 mortgages are mortgages advanced by banks to their employees. And most of you will know that those mortgages are not market-based because the banks will subsidize. So you pay 5%. But market-based mortgages are very low. If you look at the ratio of mortgage to rent in this country, it is 1 to 6, one of the most highest in the world. That means that the dream of owning a home through mortgage is only a reserve of the 3% of the entire population. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is the daunting task that we have ahead of us. On the supply side, the developers obviously are looking for a return. Majority of our people work in the informal sector. Their cash flows are lumpy. When they go to the bank, they are told you are not bankable. So we have what we call a systemic problem. So how are we going to resolve it? Very quickly, number one, on the issue of land, there's a whole reform that we are embarking on. There's land value indexing that we are working on right now. It's sitting in the Senate, and we're working very closely with them. There is other, zoning provisions that we want to amend in the Fiscal Planning Act. For example, we want to introduce something called the 70-30 rule. 70-30 rule meaning that if you're building houses, say 100 and above, 30% of those houses must be affordable housing. Because if we do that, slums will keep on growing. And if you build these beautiful estates in Karen and all these other places, because we are not making provision for the people that work for you, they'll come and do those shanties just close to where you are. Now, then we have made a strategic decision as government that for us to be able to make housing affordable, we will have to put a bit of a skin in the game. And that is why, working with counties, we have gone around and identified land that is available, but we are going to service it. So, for example, working with Nakuru County through the Kenya Urban Support Program, we are going, I think in the coming month, I think the check is on my desk, we are supposed to be disbursing R1 billion shillings to the county of Nakuru. 730, I think 730 is in Nakuru County, and the other one is coming here tonight. Money is supposed to put up what we are calling resilient urban infrastructure, because investors don't necessarily want to build houses or sewer lines, and if we put stormwater drainages, they will what they do is do the investment that we want them to do. In the next 5 years, we're going to be spending 30 billion shillings to provide counties with urban grants and urban infrastructure. The urban infrastructure and there's urban institutional grants. And I can tell you that Nakuru has already is waiting for you. Now, on the cost of production of housing, we have embraced alternative building techniques as the way to go. We are amending the code, but even before we amend the code, we have embraced the Euro code. That means that if you can go and get all these people who are saying I can do a house a day using different technologies, it is a high time to start attracting that innovation. But investors also want certainty. And therefore, this program has to succeed because it gives them large economies of scale. On the processes, we have put 39 legislations for amendment, so that we can be able to make doing business much better for you. And lastly, if I deal with the issue of financing, what we have put together, and I know there's been a lot of debate, we have put two institutions. One is called Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, and the one is called National Housing Development Fund, Housing Fund. Now, why do we need these institutions? Now, a systemic issue in this country. Demand want to provide financial institutions, banks, SACCOs, with what is called a line of credit. So government has gone and borrowed 30 billion shillings, and we are advancing that money to financial institutions, to SACCOs, to provide what is called, introducing what is called secondary liquidity into the mortgage market through KMRC. Now, what is KMRC going to do? Affordability is about two main factors. One, it is about the tenure. How long can I give you to pay for your house? And the other one is the cost of capital. So we have to address those two issues. So on the tenure, at the moment we know that banks and SACCOs are not able to give you long tenure. That is why mortgages are very expensive. So KMRC now will allow banks to provide mortgages for up to 20 years. And that is for everybody in the market. So this is not just for those who are classified as affordable. Number two, we are now able to give, for the first time in this country, fixed mortgages. We are finalizing the business plan, but at the moment we are looking at 10% fixed mortgages for everybody in this country. Now, but there is an eligibility criteria which will knock out a whole lot of Kenyans. And that is why we have established the housing fund. The housing fund is going to do two things. One, it is going to provide you as an investor with what is called guaranteed offtake. Whatever houses you build that comply with our development framework, we will buy those houses. You don't have to sell them to the market because you have issues with Wanjiko. But we understand Wanjiko, and we are patient with Wanjiko, right? And we want Wanjiko to have a house because Article 47 guarantees Wanjiko a right to a house. Therefore, leave us to deal with Wanjiko. Your job is to do mass production of houses. We will give you land. We will service the land. We will give you fast-track approvals, and we will buy all those houses from you. And then, therefore, that means that there is going to be certainty for you as an investor. And that is the most revolutionary part of this particular program. Then, because Wanjiko sometimes has lumpy cash flows, Wanjiko has very little income, we are able to give what is called a national tenant purchase scheme. What that means is that the same amount of money Wanjiko is paying for rent today, she will continue to pay for that same amount, but we can extend credit to her for 25, 30 years, and we do even what is called multi-generational mortgages. Why? Because ultimately, Wanjiko needs a house. Not just because of the four walls and a roof, but it's because owning a house is one of the biggest steps out of poverty. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a very comprehensive program. It has, I'm glad I'm joined by Mr. Kimori here, who is our new member at National Housing Corporation. And we are working to transform our institutions so that the biggest challenge in this country, and we went through a public participation, is trust. There seems to be a trust deficit between government and the public because in the past there has been too many issues. So you can take this to the bank that this fund is going to be administered with the highest level of professionalism. So ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have to say. Join us in this program. There's a lot that we can share with you. Go to our website, download the development framework guideline. We have presentations, but in the next 4 days, the journey begins. We're breaking ground, and once we break ground, we're going to turn this country into one massive construction site. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, P.S. Ngamo. Another round of applause, especially for the information he has shared. I don't know how many of you knew that before, because I didn't sense excitement. Did you know it before? No, so that is a very massive construction site in the next 14 days, beginning in Nakuru, Naivasha, Nairobi, Nakuru, Naivasha. MCAs, do I hear you celebrating? Great. I'd like to invite a a gentleman who stands to represent the private sector from Nakuru County. He's also the man behind Bedi Investments, but he comes also as the chair, welcome sir, as the chair of the Export Promotion Council. Welcome me, rather join me in welcoming Mr. Jaswinder Bedi. Karibu. I believe his presentation will be set and ready for him. Karibu. Here's the microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mike, for that introduction. I was just waiting for this little digital device that will help me do this presentation. I'm actually very, very honored to be invited here to speak in this conference, not only because that I'm the chair of EPC and the director of KEPSA, but more importantly, I am thoroughbred Nakuru, born in Nakuru, brought up in Nakuru, live in Nakuru, and I still work in Nakuru. So this is where my passion lies. I would like to welcome the honorable guests that are here today, Cabinet Secretary, the PSCs that are here today, Chairman, Chamber, MPs, ladies and gentlemen, Governor and Deputy Governor, and all protocols observed. I would like to talk about Africa and Kenya and Nakuru and the opportunities that lie in front of us. Unfortunately, most of us don't see the opportunities because, as we all know, Kenya is growing, Africa is growing, and the map is in front of you. What you can see here is the entire continent of Africa integrating into one big marketplace. On the 18th of March this year, in Kigali, in Rwanda, 44 presidents signed the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and Kenya was the first country to ratify with Ghana in the African Union that we subscribe to an expanded market. So what you see in this map is building blocks that were already in the pipeline for many, many years, and finally we have signed the Continental Free Trade Agreement. We're looking at a huge market. We're looking at over 1.2 billion people on this continent. And right now we have 9 countries that have ratified this agreement. And as soon as we reach 22 countries, and I'm sure my PS will talk about this opportunity, the whole East, West, North, South Africa will open to us. And you can imagine the opportunity that lies in front of us. Of course, this is going to give us a huge opportunity, not only in the region, but beyond the region. And if you look at the sheer landmass of Africa, the United States, European Union, India, China, Japan can all fit into this landmass. If you look at what we have, is a market size today of $1.6 trillion, and this is grown to grow very rapidly in the next couple of years to $2.6 trillion. We see a population rising. By 2040, we will have the world's biggest working age population in the continent of Africa. We will have 1.2 billion people who will be of working age. It will be bigger than India and bigger than China. So the opportunity lies on the continent. These are some of the statistics that, sorry, I lost that. But anyway, these are some of the statistics of Kenya, which most of you know. I think what you need to know is beyond this statistics, which is, of course, we are the 5th largest economy. We have a massive opportunity in front of us. And I think I'm actually going to do away with this gadget. It's not working too well for me. But to tell you the opportunities that we have in front of us, you roll it, yeah. Thank you. So right, so I think the best thing to talk about now would be what our imports are and what our exports are, and what are the opportunities that lie in between the two. Currently, Kenya is exporting about $6 billion, and we import about $17 billion. Currently, the deficit between imports and exports is about $11 billion, and that is what is the opportunity for us to invest in. I mean, I keep telling everybody, what is the point of us importing a fork and a knife when it's only mabati that you need to kunja into the right shape, and that really should be made in Kenya? Why should you even bring it out of China? And similarly, what we've done at the EPC, we've mapped out all these $17 billion of imports, and what are we importing from, and where are we importing from, and what is the value of that imports, and how can we make those domestically. So there's a lot of opportunities. We're also looking at the markets and where we are exporting the most. Our number one market today is Pakistan. We do $1.2 billion of tea, and our second largest market is Uganda, and followed by United States, which is the third largest market. If you look at the product lines that we export, of course, tea being number one. Second is horticulture, floriculture at about $800 million. Number three is petroleum goods. And number four, believe it or not, is textiles and apparel. And that is largely to the US, where we have duty-free market access. And that's a $400 million business at the moment, employing over 50,000 people, and a business that needs to be expanded, and a business that will be expanded in this county. And I believe there is a textile park that's being built here in Naivasha, which will actually service that marketplace. So lots of opportunities. I think the mantra here is value addition. To give you a very simple example, on the $1.2 billion tea that we're exporting, 97% of the tea goes in as majani chai, just raw tea. And if we can add value to that tea and sell it as a finished tea bag, we can move that needle from $1.2 billion to almost $8 billion. So it's a game changer. So when you look at the opportunity that lie ahead of us, and I don't know why all of us in the morning we drink English breakfast tea, and there's not a single bush in England that grows tea. All that tea comes from Africa and comes from Kenya and comes from Caribbean. So we started branding our tea differently and not drinking English breakfast tea, but drinking Kenyan breakfast tea. Paradigms, I think, we're trying to do, and that's why the cabinet has recently approved that the Export Promotion Council will be merged with Brand Kenya, so that we can brand ourselves better and we can actually get that value that which you're missing. If you look at the imports that we are doing right now are largely from two countries. I actually call it one country. I call it India, that is together. 35% of our imports come from India. That to me is a serious opportunity for us if we can start manufacturing what they are supplying to us. Our third largest imports come from United Arab Emirates, and I think that's two items that we bring in. Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Africa, that's really the mix. And so it's $16.9 billion of business that we're actually giving away, the jobs that we're exporting. And we need to be looking at it very differently so that we can start adding value here in this continent. The imports that, of course, we do is a lot of it is machinery, iron and steel, pharmaceutical products, crude oils, crude edible oils. So there's a lot of opportunity that we could actually just do all this in the domestic market. So on the Big Four agenda, of course, I think the government is very clear, and everybody's talked about it, and this conference is also aligned to the Big Four agenda. One of the agendas is manufacturing, and that is really the agenda that will create jobs. And to me personally, you know, the jobs that we need are very easily got in the industries that the government has earmarked into as growth industries, because labor-intensive industry, that's leather. They want to build a leather city. There's a textile city being built. And those are the industries that we really need to massively. We've got 70% of our population which is under the age of 30, and we've got 70% of that population is unemployed. So we have really a huge social opportunity in front of us, and we have a great opportunity to employ all these people. If you look at what is happening around the world, I think the entire world is looking at what can we do differently, how can we do differently, and how can we actually create the jobs that are required for the continent of Africa. And if you look at what's going on with the migration from North Africa and that migration into Europe, is really because it's the greener pastures that people are looking for across the borders. So I'm very happy to report that the government is very clear on creating jobs and creating jobs in the right sectors and actually improving the livelihoods of people and giving hope to the society at large. And I think with those few remarks, I will end my speech here because I can see the Deputy President has just arrived and maybe it'll be the opportune time for me to end over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jazz. Thank you. Indeed, Jazz is very correct. Could I ask for help, please? Housekeeping, Sawela, housekeeping. Ladies and gentlemen, could I kindly ask you not to move out? Kindly. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Kindly do not move out. Kindly. Thank you. Our chief guest will view just a few exhibition stands and then... Actually, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding. The Deputy President is here. To attention. Your Excellency, the Deputy President, Honorable William Ruto, with your permission, we'd already began, and thank you, sir. I'll proceed then. Thank you very much. At the point of the program that we'd reached, we'd received a presentation by the Permanent Secretary, or Principal Secretary for Housing, Hinga Mwaura. He's had to excuse himself because of travel, and so he's going back to Nairobi and flying out of the country. We also received a presentation just now from Jas Bedi, representing the business community in Nakuru, but also as the Export Promotion Council Chair and a businessman himself. As you may already know, the conference, of course, focusing on harnessing our natural resources for industrial growth. And amongst the people who are present, who you might see or might have seen already, though some of them you didn't see because of the entry. You have the governor who is with you, the MP Naivasha, the MP Nakuru Town West, the deputy governor for Nakuru is here, the PS International Trade is also here, the Speaker of the Nakuru County Assembly is present. I just mentioned Mr. Bedi, the chairman of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the CAS Treasury, Honorable Nelson Gashui, also amongst the legislative body for Nakuru County, the CECMs. We've got leaders of various corporations and academic institutions. With no further ado then, it would be my pleasure and honor to welcome the PS International Trade, Dr. Chris Kipto, for a brief presentation before we proceed with the rest of the program. Could we welcome him with a round of applause, please?
Your Excellency, the Deputy President, the Honorable Speaker, Honorable Cabinet Secretary, CAS, Governor, and may I say all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm happy to come back to stage again. Yesterday evening, in the afternoon, I made a presentation, and I promised to do a short presentation regarding our strategy on exports. It happens that when we were launching the export strategy, His Excellency the President was represented by none other than the Deputy President. So, sir, you will be seeing some familiar slides that you already saw. But as my colleague puts it on the stage, now go back. Yesterday, when I came in, there was a presentation by a Korean consultant, and he spoke of the story of the, you call it the fish, which one? The koi fish. And he said, you could choose to be a koi fish in a boil, in which case you will grow small, or you could be a koi fish in a pond, which will be bigger than in a bowl, but you could also be a koi fish in a river. This strategy is presenting a case for Kenya to be a koi fish in the river. And we start from that story, which I think has ably presented. The red line is our imports. That is our import story. For the last 10 years, you can see there has been a consistent increase in our imports. And the blue line is exports. Exports have also been increasing, but you can see that the pace at which imports have been growing has been much faster than the pace at which exports have been growing. And this is reflected in the green line. Maybe I should have changed the colors so that the green line is the red one. But I think we chose to put it green because, as Chairman has put it, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us if we focus on imports and we try to see how to manage, to make sure that instead of importing some of the things we do, we actually import substitute, which is why this forum is important, because you are attracting investments. And you want investors to come to be able to produce some of the things that we are importing. Next slide. That is another story about the world. All countries that have done well, talk of Korea, talk of China, talk of India, US, they have grown because of doing well in exports. And when you compare the ratio of exports to GDP, their total income, it has been increasing. And you can see that for the whole world, in that, where we say world exports of GDP, as percent of GDP, it has been going up. But look at the story of Kenya. it has not been consistent with the world story. So this is where we start. We are saying we want to do a paradigm shift and begin to address and reverse this trend. So next slide. So we came up with a national trade policy, because you have to have a policy framework that helps you to address, and the cabinet approved. And the main theme is to address the narrow range of export products and the narrow range of export markets. And you can see the statistics there. Next slide. You are familiar with this. It's a repetition of what EPC chair presented. The story is, if you look at this, you can count Pakistan, Uganda, and the rest. You can count up to 15 countries. The rest, which is all other countries, constitute 27.35%. What we are saying here is that we have a narrow range of markets. Yet there are over 193 countries in the world which we should be able to trade. And we are working with Chairman Kiprono Kitony and fellow colleagues from the private sector to see how to reach out to those markets. Next slide. Products. Again, if you look at it, is a quarter of our exports are tea, followed by horticulture. Then you can see coffee is a distant fourth. Coffee used to do very well. It was one of the leading export earnings in the 70s and even up to 80s. It's now a distant fourth. But there is opportunity to reverse that trend. But you can see total of 12 products constitute only about 68%. The rest are many, many other products. We would like to broaden this. So, next slide. Now, where do we export? By region. You can see forget about the last line, because this is total exports. But look, where we export most is Africa. So, when you see us actively engaged in pursuing regional integration, it's because strategically, this is our market. And we have 40, if you look at the figures, 40 to 45% of our trade, of our exports, is to Africa. And it's mainly to EAC and COMESA. Yet there is the rest of SADC, which we don't access because of high tariffs. There is ECOWAS, West Africa, and the rest. So there is opportunity, and I'm coming back to it. The next, no, sorry, go back. The next is Europe. And Europe, because traditionally we have been accessing it for a long time. I will come back to it. But look at Asia. Asia has been doing well, but not so well. Then America, of course, is because it's a small market compared to the rest because of the population. But America ranks number 3. US has become now number 3, leading the export destination. Number 1 is Pakistan. The second is Uganda. Then America. Then UK. And Tanzania is around number 6, with a lot of East African countries being top 10. Go to the next slide. This is the imports. Where do we import most? You can see we import most from Far East. Do you remember the story of Chindia that just Betty talked about? China and India. Look, so let's go to the slide. That is the India and China. And that is the Chindia. Look, the blue line, the blue bar. Chindia, we have been importing so much, except in the last 3-4 years, there's been a slight decline. Look at our exports to that market. Stagnant. The story is even worse for China. You can see, now it is almost a 25% of our imports are from China. Only 2%, less than 2%